Hello everybody, Graveless here, bringing you a tutorial on early game drives, what you should be looking for, and how to actually judge them. This is an update to my older guide because a large number of drive stats have been changed. So, let's start off with what does an early game drive mean? What this means to me is that the drive comes online before either advanced fission or any of the antimatter or fusion lines. It's mainly used at the point where you are either not necessarily at total war with the aliens, or total war has begun relatively shortly, unless you're playing a very aggressive strategy. With that in mind, most of my early game drive review is going to be focused on orbital defense, and specifically the defense of Earth orbit. Any other orbit, you can get away with a lot more than you can in Earth orbit, simply because you're unlikely to have as many space stations floating around in different orbital bands that require different times to get to. The worst Earth defense drive will work perfectly fine for most of what you need on Mars. I say this, the solar array station might matter, but regardless, you're probably not going to wind up with 18 or 20 stations around Mars the way you do around Earth. So, first things first, we need to talk about stats. What stats are we looking for? If you've watched my Explain the Ship Designer video, this would hopefully help. I will go over a little bit of that after this, but the stats I'm going to talk about are all final design stats. And that's these. These are figures that I've found to work very well on orbital defense, and the second one is on offense, which is primarily focused on the asteroid belt, eventually going up to Jupiter. Let's start with the reasons why. The reasons why are that you need to beat the aliens to your station before it's destroyed. Ideally, you beat them to the station before they even get to attack it, which is what drives in the ideal category are capable of pulling off. Drives in the good category are certainly going to beat them to the station before it's destroyed, and probably will beat them on some transfers before they actually start destroying it. And drives in the okay category are you're at risk of stations being blown up. No two ways around it, they can't get there fast enough. These values are all derived from comparing the stats that the alien fleets usually use, where they will drop in on low Earth orbit 1 and then figure out what they want to hit. Now, it is possible that even with an ideal drive, you can't stop them because they drop in on LEO 1 and immediately decide to kill the thing right next to them. If they land on top of your station, there's really not much you can do, and there's no good way we found to predict where the aliens are going to land. For offensive drives, the thrust ratings for milliges are all around how bad a route do you need to take. At 0.5 millige, you're going to be taking a looping route to get to your location using more gravity assists than you probably want to. At 2 millige, you can go fairly straight, and at 10 millige, you can go pretty much directly at whatever your target is. For delta V values, in orbital defense, 8 delta V means you can get from low Earth orbit to extreme Earth orbit. This is the furthest you're basically ever going to need to go. You may need to taxi back or have something else, but it also means that outside of low Earth orbit to extreme Earth orbit, you can get there and back without having to refuel or do anything funky. 4 delta V will get you to almost every Earth orbit, and some of them you're going to have to do something to get back. 2 delta V is a one-way trip to wherever you're going, but it will be able to get you there, mostly medium Earth orbit to low Earth orbit. On offense, 50 delta V is roughly what you need to get to Jupiter. That's why it's our ideal. 30 delta V will get you to most of the asteroid belt. There might be a few hiccups, or you have to take a pit stop at Mars or something. And 20 delta V is where it's a little rough, but you're still going to be getting around the belt, and also this can get you between Earth and Mars or between Earth and Mercury with a good amount of speed in the event that you lose one of those orbits and need to reinforce it. So, let's go into some basic designs. In here, we're going to start out with our little baby missile escort. If you want to, this could also be a railgun escort. It is the lightest ship that I would recommend anyone seriously use in combat. You send these things out and you do not expect them to come back. The reason why we're talking about final stats is ship weight matters, and that matters a lot in regards to drive recommendations. As you can see, we have 2G, not milli-G, of cruise acceleration and 2.3 kips. This is with the Nova liquid rocket, and this is the first drive you're going to unlock because it's the one that lets you get cheaper costs for boosting things up to orbit. Everything in early game drives needs to be compared to this, and it needs to be better than it in some meaningful way to really justify making use of it. And that's an unfortunate thing about early game drives, is a lot of them just don't. I do have a massive spreadsheet for this. I'm going to try and avoid using the... Oh, one moment. I noticed I left the counter online. I cannot be trusted with Discord overlays. Here's the Nova liquid rocket, as stated. Now, we have not maxed out our combat. You can go up to 6. It doesn't really matter that much. 6 armor on the nose is just enough to survive delivering its entire payload. So, let's move on from the Nova liquid rocket and talk about the first real upgrade drive that you can get from the Nova liquid rocket. That is the advanced Cermet Nerva. So remember, our stats here are 2G and 2.3 kips. If we go to the advanced Cermet Nerva, we get to 131 milli-G and 4.1 kips. This is actually a substantial upgrade. It gets you very close to that ideal cruise and has twice as much delta V for the same amount of fuel overall. The problem with the advanced Cermet Nerva is you're not guaranteed to get it, and it's behind multiple unlocks and rolls. It's a very good drive in the solid core line. I actually realized I have the wrong power plant. Forgive me for a moment. Let's swap over to that and get ourselves up to 6. There we go. Better. Compact solid core is what you want to use if you're using this in terms of reactor. I'm just going to show obsolete and show you compact solid core 5. Yeah, like, this is what you really want to be doing if you're going to be using a solid core drive, just because of how light it is. Look at those stats. Like, for almost everything you're going to do, this beats the Nova liquid rocket on escorts. The advanced Cermet Nerva falls off faster than the Nova liquid rocket because its thrust is just barely ideal on the lightest ship. If we move up in ship weight, it still is more fuel efficient, but its thrust starts falling off and off and off. To use another ship as an example, we're going to go up to the battlecruiser. Ignore what was going on there for a moment. And where's advanced Cermet Nerva? Here we go. Now we've fallen all the way down to merely okay in both delta V and in terms of thrust. So one star rating on both of those, where if I go and I find my Nova liquid rocket, boy is this inefficient, but it can still get the ship going fast enough to be ideal. And as a note, Nova liquid rocket costs in total 1,800 research to get. Advanced Cermet Nerva costs 13,000. But it is not the be-all, end-all of solid core drives. If you are familiar with very early on in the beta, there is also the advanced Pulsar drive. The advanced Pulsar drive, still actually pretty good. It's not, you know, powers this large battle cruiser at good speed tier, but it's certainly doing better than the Cermet Nerva does. Like, we do this, we get almost into okay, and we're well into ideal delta V. If this was a monitor, advanced Pulsar, yeah, you can do both monitors and escorts just fine. The problem is this drive has even less likely to unlock, and costs almost twice as much research points as the advanced Cermet Nerva. This is going to be something that we see pretty often. But let's go up to our heavier ship. This is our early monitor. Our early monitor, again, you're not expecting it to live. You can run the Nova liquid rocket. Simple enough. This is the core of the monitor fleet. This is a ship you expect to go out, kill an enemy, or kill a large number of enemies, and come back just fine. For this tier of ship, Molten Core drives are fantastic, and honestly, any of the Molten Core line is good. The Molten Core line is just a very solid line of drives. They're higher in thrust at the cost of a little bit of fuel efficiency than many of their counterparts. But the better drives, with a few notable exceptions, don't really get fuel efficiency that meaningful. They might go up to 5.8, which is... it's nice, but it's not going to significantly change your life. Now, Molten Core, we're ignoring the Lars drive because it's a prerequisite. The Molten Core ones that we care about are the Teardrop drive, the Fission Spinner, and the Pegasus drive. Now, the Pegasus is not guaranteed, but it is, depending on how you look at it, the second best early game drive. Look at how much thrust we have. We, in fact, do not need all of these engines in order to get a huge amount of thrust. Like, 2 engines is more than enough. Let's go up to our heavier ship, shall we? Again, battle cruiser, the next major upgrade in terms of ship weight. Here's a Pegasus drive battle cruiser. This is a fantastic stat line. Like, you really do want a little bit more fuel, but luckily for you, the Pegasus drive can use the slush tank hydrogen storage. Oh, look at that. That's a lot of fuel. We can even go up to 50 tanks, and we are now pretty close to ideal orbital defense drive at a mid-weight ship. The big thing for the Pegasus drive is that it's the first drive you're going to get where you need to consider how many nozzles do you actually put on it. Because you don't need all of them, and it has a pretty bad power usage efficiency, so every additional one is going to make your radiator and your reactor a lot heavier. I think that was it. All right. Yeah, because it has no weight by itself. I think it might actually just be reactor, not radiator. Let me check that. Because I just noticed it's open cycle. Okay, yeah, sorry. Your reactor, not your radiator. Brief correction. So, fantastic drive to go to. Be careful when using it because of fuel-related issues. Similar to Molten Core, all of the gas core line, solid. I like Molten Core more because they are both cheaper in terms of research, and also, like, the gas core line does not outdo them by that much. And the end of these are the Light Bulb, the Pharos, Super Vortex, and Advanced Cavity. So let's look at the Light Bulb drive. We're a lot slower, but we're way more efficient with this drive. This is the trade-off I meant. Let's get rid of slush tank hydrogen storage, actually. So, like, this Pegasus versus Light Bulb, there's a debate there. Like, this is entirely what do you prefer. Similarly, Pharos. Pharos, I think, Pharos is overall the better of the two, like, quite clearly. But let me just quickly look up what the chance to unlock it is. Pharos Drive, yeah, Pharos Drive has a base unlock chance of 40%. So you might not get this one when you're trying to make use of it. But how about one that I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of if they've watched Terra Invicta content at all, the Burner Drive. The Burner Drive is the first, like, actually fuel-efficient drive. There is one problem, and that problem is it's slow. That cruise acceleration is pathetic. Going back down to our monitor. For Earth defense, I would hesitate to run monitors with the Burner Drive. I regard it as an escort-only drive for Earth defense. Mars defense, you're almost certainly fine with this, and it will save you a lot of fuel. Tea of the day today is Scottish Caramel. I honestly have no idea how this one's named. It does taste a little bit of caramel, but I don't know enough about English versus Scottish tea to really tell the difference. So, the last one that I want to show you on the obviously good and worth talking about drives is Orion. The Orion drive is my baby. This is because the Orion drive is the only drive that is basically ideal in all categories in the early game. At the battlecruiser and battleship tier, it falls off in thrust slightly, going down to merely being good rather than being ideal. The problem with the Orion drive is that it uses 3 nobles pure fuel. per fuel tank, and this is pretty expensive. It also costs more than almost every other drive in this subset, and even in a different tree. Problem is, its tree does not allow you to use any of the good offensive drives. Its tree is itself and itself alone until you get to advanced fission. So, let's talk about offensive drives for a second. In offensive drives, there's actually relatively few to remotely care about. 1 minute. Let me go back to our early escort for a second. The first of these, I just need to find it. Where are you, Vasimer? So, Vasimer is a very unique drive. Its unique property is it's insanely cheap to research. It's not very good. It doesn't really upgrade into anything very good, but you can research this drive basically out of the gate, and I'm just going to send from our Earth shipyard to... I'm just going to click Jupiter and see if we can do that. We might. Yeah. This drive you can out of the gate, like, literal start of the game, send a ship to Jupiter with. And not at a great speed, but it'll do it. It's pretty unique in that regard. However, its older brother, the Advanced Vasimer, by the time you get this, it doesn't manage to get you up into okay thrust. It's not that much better in cruise delta V, and it costs as much research as some very good drives, and in fact, more research than the grid drive. Let me get rid of this. The grid drive is the first long-distance drive in the game you really want to be using. As you can see, this drive gets you to... This drive is good in terms of thrust and ideal in terms of how far it can send things. For quite some time, you are going to be running entirely off of this. The main upgrades to the grid drive are first the Helicon drive, which is right here. Which needs a stronger power plant also. 1 second. You know, even faster and even better delta V. This is the best long-range drive you're going to have for basically the entirety of the early game. It has a sibling, the Lorenz drive. It's basically better than the Lorenz drive in every way. Like, it's unfortunate but true that... Lorenz versus Helicon, the only claim to fame the Lorenz drive gets is you can research it slightly sooner than Helicon. And the last one for this is down here, which is the Fission Frag drive. Fission Frag is the earliest good long-distance drive. As you can see here, we're at good cruise thrust and well over ideal delta V. There is just one teensy tiny little problem with the Fission Frag drive if you see it. And that is this 10 fissile per tank propellant cost. Unless you got incredibly lucky on the Moon and Mars, you are not affording this thing. But there's a curious question. What about our very, very efficient burner drive? Oh my! That's, those stats are ideal for, easily ideal for the amount of thrust, and we're good in terms of delta V. This is one of the fun things. The burner is the first all-purpose drive that can, in fact, do everything, though not as good as any of the specialists in its own category. Burner drive, let me go double check what the heaviest ship we can do. All right, so let's use our battleship. This is the heaviest ship I would recommend people really use with the early game drives. I'm going to put our burner in here, and we're sending this battleship to... how many tanks do we want to do? Let's be a little splurgy and say we're going for 50 tanks. Seems pretty good for asteroid belt missions. Like, it's not going to get you to Jupiter fast, but let's check Ceres. I guess we are out of phase with Ceres. Let's check another random asteroid. Yeah, 41 weeks, 99 weeks. Asteroids, a lot depends on whether you're in phase or out of phase. Like, it would be better to use a long distance drive for that, but if for some reason you wind up at, or like, let's go down to a more reasonable thing of you send a swarm of missile monitors out into the asteroid belt. You give them, let's say 30 tanks of fuel because it's relatively cheap. Yeah, you can go from Earth orbit to random asteroids with this, and you never need to research another drive. This isn't a good idea, note. But it's something you can do, and more importantly, I think actually, this is a good way to say, let's say the worst happens. You have lost Earth orbit, but you still have ships around Mars. That's a pretty reasonable way to get ships back into Earth orbit that are capable of running any amount of defense after they get there. But one last drive to show off, one that I'm particularly happy with because in the big discussion on drives, I noticed this one, and the stats got changed in part because of my feedback, is the superconducting mass driver. This is in okay for the amount for thrust and good in terms of delta V. There was a slight change overall to the drive stats that did this. And one thing that's important, this drive is in the electromagnetic line. That's the same line that eventually leads to the Helicon line. One thing that I've done is actually test out using the superconducting mass driver for orbital defense, the Helicon for offense, and basically ignoring everything else in the fission tree, which can save you a fair bit of research points in the early game if you want to go for that. Is this as reliable for a new player as just going up the solid core, molten core, gas core line, grabbing either a molten core drive or Pharos and eventually Orion? No, it is not. But it's something that's like cute and an off-meta pick that I found to actually be fairly viable. It's not strong enough to do anything above an escort. It's kind of in the same way the burner really isn't. I'd call this a basically a proto burner that you can get for half the research price of the burner in a tree that gives you a good long distance drive. And let me just take a look at my list of drives to see if there's anything else worth particularly calling out. No, so last thing that I'm going to do is basically show you in the tech tree the reasons why these happen. Most of the drives we talked about are, you go nuclear fission in space, solid core fission systems, molten core fission systems, gas core. This will get you all of your orbital defense drives, and the main ones that I talked about. If you want to jump off to Orion instead, you go solid core fission systems and then into fission pulse drives. So that's where you get Orion. It's a lot of research just for one drive, but it is the best early game drive in terms of stats. If instead you want to go up to your long distance drives, electrostatic is what leads to grid. So you get the ion drive and the grid drive after you do electrostatic plus, I believe it's carbon nanotubes. Yeah, carbon nanotubes plus electrostatic. So if we view full tree for a second and I look up the grid drive, you can see that it requires one, this UI is bad. One of solid core fission reactor 1 or fuel cell 3, along with carbon nanotubes in the ion drive. This UI is bad. There are ways they could have done better with this. Versus instead, let us go over to Helicon. So Helicon drive instead requires high energy electromagnetic propulsion, along with either solid core 2 or molten core 1. High energy electromagnetic propulsion is also what gets you the superconducting mass driver, along with the advanced Vassimer and the Lorenz, both of which are not that great. So, one thing you can do is rush that. And get some actually viable options as long as you stick to small ships. I'm going to go into more detail on ship designs in a later video, but to quickly explain these ship classes and then call it good. Early escort, you always need a targeting computer, you want a magazine, and you grab 2 projectile weapons. These can be railguns. If they are, you don't need the magazine, or they can be missiles. You really want them to be missiles. For monitors, there are multiple theories. I like having a 40mm autocannon set to defense mode. It starts in Guardian, you set it to defense down here. Let me just make sure Facecam is not covering that. Good, it's not. Along with 3 missile launchers, a target computer, and 2 magazines. Going up to battle cruisers. Battle cruisers are your beam ship. I'm using ultraviolet arc lasers here, supported by 3 laser engines. You could instead go for a particle beam cannon supported by 3 cyclotrons. You want either the heavy particle lance or the antimatter cannon in this case. And the utility module is this guy, the cyclotron. And you also want to set that to attack mode on the nose because you want it shooting things. You would also swap this over to an ion point defense. Again, these are your beam ships. You use them to do beams. And then your battleship, you want your kinetics. I have Coil Cannon 2 here. You can also use Railgun Mark 3, along with 2 2-slot batteries and 2 40mm autocannons. The battleship will want to equip utility modules because kinetics don't have many of those. And as always, if you are not using missiles or a 40mm, you want a heat sink, because those guns will generate heat, and that heat will consume a significant amount of... and that heat will make it so your radiator either gets shot off and you can't shoot, or you're dead in the water. Anyway, in the description, I'm going to put in my little grid about what cruise thrust and delta V you need, along with my recommendations for each tier of drives and the main useful ones to look for, along with any call-outs surrounding them. But if there's other drives that you want to try using, just go compare those stats. Like, it turns out most of the solid core line is perfectly viable to use on missile escorts. Like, here's the particle drive. That's perfectly viable to use. Here's Dumbo. Perfectly viable to use. Here is the rover drive, which is not something anyone would ever call good. Perfectly viable to use. What matters most for drive viability is, can it accomplish the mission that you want the ship to do? And this would be perfectly capable of doing an orbital defense mission. It's just not worth it compared to the Nova rocket. Anyway, this is Graveless. I hope you guys all are enjoying the game, and I hope you all have a good time. Catch you later.